Hi. Um, so in this video, I'd like to discuss very briefly my experiences in getting my math PhD and what it took to actually get the degree. Now, to be clear, my research is applied math. My bachelor's and master's was also in applied math, but I was accepted into a math program. So there was no distinction between applied math and pure math. So for those that are looking to apply to a pure math program, I won't necessarily be able to give the best insights into that specialty, rather that field. So I'll be speaking more about applied math, and then this video is also for people that want to become an academic. If you're going into industry, that's something that I know very little about. I know some things in broad strokes, but that's something that I will not be talking in much detail, just because I don't know much about it. All right, so you want to become an academic and you want to get a math PhD. And for this video, it's best if I'm assuming that you're wanting to go into an applied math direction with your math PhD. So let's say that you've gotten into a program and you're ready to start. All right. So the whole issue of actually finding a program and personal statements and all those things, that's another problem that I won't talk about. So let's say you're actually in a PhD program. At Pittsburgh, where I was, we had a preliminary exam. So this is the exam where you need to pass it. That's the minimum threshold you need to pass to be able to proceed in the program. In our case, we had two topics. It was linear algebra and real analysis. And the exams are actually publicly available. I'll include a description, link in the description. But they're advanced undergraduate level exams, and you're allowed to take them when you first come in the fall. Some people pass. It just means that they're very good mathematicians coming in. And most of us fail. In my case, I failed. But we get 4 chances total, 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring. And the first time taking it coming in doesn't count towards those 4. So in that first year, you're required to take a class in linear algebra for 2 semesters, a class in real analysis for 2 semesters. Some people call it advanced calculus. And those are designed to help you prepare for the preliminary exams. So in my case, I freaked out because, I'm only an applied math major. I took, math classes requiring proofs and things, but it wasn't necessarily my forte. So I worked a lot, starting from the moment that I came to campus in the summer of 2013. I said, you know what, my concepts are weak. I need to pass this bar, which is set by pure mathematicians. So I worked at it. Worked long hours. Fortunately, my cohort was very talented and very smart and also very hardworking. And so I had a lot of opportunity to chat with my cohort and solve problems and get unstuck. And through that, learn exactly how to think about these problems. So we met every week, and in between those weeks, we picked a problem set and we said we're going to solve this many problems. And as the time to the prelims came closer, we started accelerating the pace of increasing the number of problems and trying to accelerate the pace of how quickly we could solve problems. A lot of us passed. That was very difficult. It's hard to communicate how hard it was, just because this is a long time ago. But anyways, the point is that a lot of us passed in the first year, which also it's relatively uncommon. The years before and after us tended to have a higher failure rate through no fault of their own. I mean, this is some of the quality differs, but in my case, I think we really did deserve the passing. So that was step 1, was to make sure to get through that minimum bar that was set by the department. And yes, I have complaints about it. People have complaints about having a timed exam you're given 4 hours to solve a bunch of problems, and then another 4 hours another day to solve another bunch of problems. And it's just like math doesn't work like that, right? However, the reality is the bar's there, the requirements are very clear. You know in yourself how far you are from passing, from meeting that standard, and so it's on you to do the work, the legwork to get up there. And that's what my class did, and I learned a lot from them. All right, so that was bar number one, and from there on, there's no other. So right, so there's another set of exams called the comprehensive exams. Those come a few years later, but at this point, after the first year, you start doing research with your chosen advisor. So you ideally want to pick your advisor as early as possible, because a thesis takes a very long time to write, to develop. You know, it easily took me 5 years to get the contents of my thesis. My thesis were the 3 papers that I wrote during my grad program with my doctoral advisor. And, you know, it took that much time, and I did spend a lot of time on it. So try to get as, you know, in my case, I recognize that I had to start as early as possible. And that might be something that helps others to know. So I started early as possible in research. Fortunately, the research was more or less in line with what I had been trained in as an undergrad and master's student. So really, I was able to hit the ground running and get started very quickly. Sometimes it takes a while to get started. That's okay. You know, if a while just means that's as early as you were able to get started, that's fine. I have a friend who's, I think, 4th or 5th year, and she's working on publishing, you know, writing up one of her first papers. But that's still something, right? It's not like she was wasting time those entire 4 years. She had a particularly difficult experience, but the point is, you know, do your best to get as early as started as early as possible. Or rather, I'm not telling you to do that, just saying I recognize that it helped me a lot to get this started as early as possible. All right, so you do research. That's going to be always in the background all the time. This is something that you should be doing, especially if you're going to be an academic. Papers are the currency of academia. I heard that at some panel, and it's true. If you want to be an academic, you have to publish. And, you know, you don't have to publish garbage. That's not good. That's never good. You don't publish garbage. But you publish as, you know, you just be efficient about it. That's what I did my best to do, is just try to be efficient about how I publish and how I get my work done. All right, so that's in the background always, all the time, as I speak through all these different things. I'm doing research. There's the other requirement, which is the comprehensive exam that came a few years later. And this is more, you get to pick the topics at Pittsburgh. And this is kind of, it's your game to lose in this case. So I picked topics that were more or less in my field, and I happened to not pass the first time. And then, you know, the second time I studied what I thought was more appropriate, and I managed to pass. But it's really unheard of for someone to like fail that and then just like leave the program. By the time you get to the comprehensive exams, it's pretty normal to, you know, pass eventually and then keep going. Other grad programs are similar in the sense that you have some minimum bar at the beginning that you have to overcome. And then maybe there's some other exam later on before your thesis overview, before you actually start talking about your thesis and compile a thesis committee. Yeah, and so this my experience does generalize somewhat. Yeah, so just pick and choose whatever helps you. All right, so for the comprehensive exams, that took some time to figure out. And on top of research, on top of studying for these things, on top of taking classes, I was also teaching. And I had to teach, at Pittsburgh, we tend to teach a lot, much more than other grad students. That's what I'm told anyways. So teaching as a grad student, I mean, just try to be efficient. What I did was I tried to be efficient. Some people really like to teach. If you like to teach and are a good teacher because of it, you should keep doing it. I never had bad reviews. People did have some complaints. In fact, my teaching reviews are public. They're online on my website for anyone to see. But the but I didn't have bad experiences. I mean, people generally they liked me a lot. They did very well, and it's not because I was an easy grader, and I was a bit of an easy grader, but it's because my students performed. And I did my best to be a good teacher as much as I could while not sacrificing my research ability, while not sacrificing my ability to study for whatever needed to be studied. So that's a careful balance. And I'm not saying, I'm definitely not saying neglect your teaching altogether. If you're a bad teacher, if you have bad reviews, pay attention to those. I mean, you need to be a good teacher. You're playing with people's grades, and those can highly impact what they're doing in the future. You don't want to be a bad teacher. You don't want a student to get a bad grade because you're a bad teacher. If a student gets a bad grade, it should be because it should be despite the fact that you tried your best to help them, right? It should always be despite the fact that you tried to provide everything you could. And that doesn't need to take a lot of time. There comes a point when a student clearly is just, they're not attending class. You try to email them and just check in to see what's happening. You try to talk to them after class to see what's happening. And if they're still underperforming, there comes a time when enough is enough. Which doesn't have to be much, and unfortunately you have to move on. But so that's something to keep in mind, that if you can be an effective teacher, and figure out what doesn't take a whole lot of time, then then go for it. I mean, it's not just because you're not just thinking about your students, you also have to think about your career. If you want to be a research mathematician, you need to be able to spend a lot of time thinking about the problems you're working on. So again, please take this, it's not advice, it's just please take this line of thinking with some care, because you don't want to be that careless teacher, that graduate student, that careless graduate student that has a lot of failing students because they can't teach. You don't want to be that graduate student who's a bad teacher, who just gives, hands out A's, which happens. You don't want to be that graduate student that doesn't teach all the material because they didn't show up to class a bunch of times because no one was watching them. These unfortunately happen, and you're a horrible person if you do that. So do the right thing for everyone. Think about your career. Think about your students. Think about how you are effective as a teacher. And if you're ineffective, then fix it. Do your best to fix it. All right. So there's teaching, there's research, there are these exams, and then now we get past the comprehensive exams, and then it's just research. By this time, by the time I had finished my comprehensive exams, I had finished taking classes. I didn't need to take any more classes, which means no more homework assignments, no more exams, no more projects, just research. So this is the prime time to keep at it, keep teaching, keep doing research, try to be efficient, productive. Work-life balance is incredibly difficult to maintain, but you should do your best to do the things that keep you sane. I think that I definitely made a mistake pushing myself a little too hard. There were a couple times I burned out so hard, the pace of my work actually slowed down for a couple of years. I was so tired. So you want to be mindful of, are you tired because you didn't get enough sleep? Are you tired because maybe you worked out a little too hard today? Or are you tired because you're pushing yourself too hard? You're just grinding way too much. You haven't given yourself time to relax. Are you taking at least like a day off during the week? And again, this is if you're a research mathematician, this is probably what you want to do. This is something that speaks to you so deeply you want to do it every single day. You don't want to take a break. In that case, just force yourself to take a break. It's worth it, because you might feel unproductive for that one day, but it'll help you remain productive in the long term. That's the point. If you're working 7 days a week, 10, 12-hour days, which some people do, and they burn out like crazy, there's going to come a time you're very productive for, maybe a semester, maybe 2 semesters if you're incredibly tough. But there comes a time when you just burn out. And you burn out for, if you're working at that pace for that long, you burn out for months, if not years. And in that burnout stage, you're just not doing any work. Whereas if you took off, 1 or 2 days a week, you took off enough afternoons off throughout the day, you allowed yourself to take a break when, when something, a paper had been submitted, then you can sustain a consistent level of work for much longer, over the course of grad school, over the course of a career, and that is more efficient in the long term. So that's what I learned in myself, and now I work as much as I need to. I work as hard as I can, but I keep in mind that if I push too far, it's gonna keep me from working at the pace I really want to work. So that's a difficult optimization problem. That's something that's going to differ from person to person. Some people will just work, 12-hour days all the time consistently, which is amazing. Others will need a little more time. If you want to go into industry, I don't know if working too much is going to be a problem, because some people want to treat grad school like it's a 9-to-5 job. I don't know. I'm very hesitant to say that's a good idea. And I'm hesitant to say it's a bad idea, and hesitant to say it's a good idea. It's something that it depends on who you are as a person, how productive you can be during that 9-to-5, how you like to work and what you want your future to be. If you're going to industry, a 9-to-5 schedule might be okay. And I won't talk too much about it, but personally, when I've tried working 9-to-5, even if I did try my best to be efficient, I could never get enough work done. And it became clear to me that if I want to become a research scientist, I need to work more than 9-to-5. My schedule has to be very flexible. Sometimes in some mornings I'll take it very easy, like today, for example. Sometimes depending on the schedule, the afternoons might be crazy busy, the mornings might be busy, but a 9-to-5, constraining my working hours to before 6 p.m. didn't work for me personally. I didn't necessarily work, beyond a 9-hour day, but it was just at different times throughout the day. Some people have trouble with, they'll open an email at night or in the weekend and they feel like they have to work again. So people have coping methods for that. In my case, it didn't affect me too much because, I didn't mind opening an email and having to do some work at whatever time. Not that I do consider myself lazy, by the way. I mean, I do try to work and overcome that, but this is not me bragging or fishing. All right. So yeah, work-life balance, it's going to be very hard to maintain. So you want to be able to, I don't know why I keep saying you, but I guess I'm talking to myself in the past. I think that's the best way for you as the viewer to think about how I'm speaking. But I neglected the fact that I had likes and dislikes. I also did have trouble with depression. That's been basically a lifelong thing. I also had trouble. ADHD has also been a lifelong thing, and I explained that briefly in another video. But get that mental health. Be mindful of your mental health. Be mindful of your physical health. Make sure to get enough sleep. Sleep is so crucial. It's so important. Make sure you get rest. Rest is also incredibly important. You don't just learn when you're actually doing things, you also learn when you're sleeping. And the more you deprive yourself of sleep, the more you deprive yourself of actual good learning. And if you want to be a research mathematician, you want these things, you basically want to feel them in your blood, right? These theorems, you want to understand them so deeply that, every time you recognize a particular pattern in something someone's saying, that some formulation someone's written down, you want to be able to recognize that very quickly. And you can only do that if these fundamental theorems, these fundamental definitions in your field are just, they're a part of you. And a big part of that is getting enough sleep. Okay, so comprehensive exams, now we're working towards the thesis. And the thesis, so by this time, at Pitt we had an overview about a year before the thesis. And the overview is you've compiled your committee, your thesis committee, and you talk about the research you'll do for the next 1 or 2 years leading up to your defense. Very straightforward. I mean, it's basically, I wouldn't even call it an oral exam. You're just presenting on the research you're doing at the time. The work that you've been doing through that time, doing research, it will pay off when it comes to the dissertation. It certainly paid off for me, because that's really, the content, the things that you're doing as part of research along the way towards the dissertation, that's going to go in the dissertation. It certainly depends on the program. Some people have a dissertation that's like almost independent of what they do, but it's common to have your dissertation consist of the papers that you submitted or wrote during, over the course of your graduate studies. So by the time it comes to the overview, if you've started your research, if you're lucky enough to start your research early enough, if you're lucky enough to have a good advisor, and you've managed to be efficient and kept your mental health in good shape and your physical health in good shape, and managed to find a good balance between work and play, then by the time it comes to the overview, you have a very clear research plan. You know what to do, and the next year leading up to the dissertation should be straightforward. Again, that's not to say that your life will be hard if you are unable to find that research plan leading up to the dissertation. There are plenty of people, I have a lot of friends in grad school that, they started working with one advisor, they stopped working with them, started with a new advisor. I think one friend actually switched another time. Another friend didn't even have an advisor, and the last time I spoke to them was a couple of years ago. So different people take different paths, and the research is going to, the point is just do your best to find research that speaks to you. You're probably in grad school because this is something that speaks to you incredibly deeply. So just do your best to find that research that works for you, where you can be efficient, and don't worry about, fine, like again, my friend who's 4th or 5th year and is only starting to write their first paper now. That's a thing that happens. It's completely normal, and when you apply to postdocs, people are going to understand that, and they'll also get a good sense of who you are through your letters and through the interviews. So papers alone as part of grad school, it is a part of I say metric of some metric of success, so to speak, and it is very important. But at the same time, give yourself a break if you're at this point where you haven't been able to produce. There's and do your best to recognize if there's something fundamentally off that you have to address. All right. So my experience. So those are the things it took for me to actually get my PhD. It turns out you don't really need mental health to get a PhD, but it's a really bad idea to neglect your mental health. I took that path of just neglecting the social needs that I had, which I didn't remove altogether. But I mean, I'm talking about stuff like dating. That was incredibly hard as a grad student. Trying to extend my friend group. It's not something I did until much later in my graduate career, with the help of a therapist, and that did help. Having different friend groups, different support networks, it helped a lot. Yeah. It's not an easy path. It's really not for everyone. Um, Throughout this video, I'm assuming that now that if you're in grad school, you understand that the next 5, 6, 7 years are, you're gonna live like a poor person. You're in this field because you don't care about money, which is great. You care about being able to sit down and just work uninterrupted for long hours, and that's something that grad school gives you. Is it just gives you so much freedom. It gives you this kind of big macroscopic structure because you don't have to think about your career for another 5, 6 years, however long you're in grad school. And then within that day to day, there's actually a lot of freedom. You might have to teach, but then outside of that, I mean, you're doing research. So, that's how I saw it, was that grad school was for doing research. It's for learning how to publish, how to solve problems so that I can contribute to an academic paper. And technically, the PhD is supposed to be a qualification that you are an independent researcher. So the goal, another goal that I kept in mind was that by the end of these 5 years, 6 years, however long it took, in my case, it happened to be 5, I want to be an independent researcher. I came pretty dang close, didn't quite meet it. It wasn't until very recently, as part of my postdocs, that I can say I'm more of an independent researcher. But that's something to keep in mind. And so it takes a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of grinding, right? And that's another thing. It doesn't take. I've seen some, like, there's at least one person in my program who I would call a genius, and he didn't do exceptionally well relative to anyone else because the PhD is about grinding. It's a lot of, like, it's work. It's not, you're not in this ivory tower where you're pontificating on sophisticated ideas all the time. It's actually a lot of writing, a lot of programming in applied math, a lot of trying different things, especially if your work is more theoretical. You're trying things. You're pushing in different directions. So that can be, that's more of an intellectual thing, but there's a huge grind to it. You really need to have good work ethic. So yeah, my genius friend, he did get his PhD, incredibly talented. I mean, it's unbelievable how good he is. But he, in terms of getting things done and graduating, I mean, he was just totally like middle of the pack, because grad school is a lot of, it's just a lot of grunt work. There's a lot in there that is not, it doesn't meet that idealized, fantasy picture of what graduate students do in like movies, I guess. If you watch A Beautiful Mind, for example, I mean, well, that's Princeton. That's maybe a little different, but anyways, you get the idea. So a colleague once told me that grad school is, to get a PhD, it takes tenacity. That's the one characteristic you need to have, tenacity, because day to day it's gonna suck. I personally really enjoyed that horrible feeling of needing to grind through the dumbest things. Not necessarily the dumbest things, but stuff like writing, stuff like programming, stuff that you have to write this program because you're at the bleeding edge of research. There's no program that's going to do stuff for you, so you have to write a lot of things and develop a lot of things on your own. I love that stuff, and fortunately for me, the tenacity, that interest, that passion, just kind of came together with just pushing myself forward. And that ended up well. And I see that if you can just be tenacious, just keep pushing day to day. It's not easy. It's this day to day. Like if an alien came in and saw your life one day, they'd be like, why is this person struggling? They're just kind of hanging out. They're not doing any physical labor. It's very, it's like, this guy's not doing anything, or this gal. But the fact of the matter is that this is a long process. It's over at least 5 years, and it's gonna suck. So just keep in mind that you have to be tenacious. Keep pushing through. You're going to have so many days when you feel like you can't push through, but every day you can be a little tenacious. It doesn't require much. Just keep push just a little bit, get that one sentence out, get that one page out, get that, write up that one function for that one script you're working on. Read, skim over the abstract of a couple papers, read the equation or the relevant part of a key paper that you've been wanting to read. Just keep pushing a little bit. And above all, I think that's what helped me. All right, so I hope this was helpful and informative. In the future, I'll try to be a little more organized about how I do these things, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways, and thanks for watching.